Welcome to the Fantasy Sunflower quilt. This is the first block of the quilt. You don't see the quilt behind me yet because it's not completed, but at the end of the video we will have a completed quilt for you to view. This block starts off with a 12.5-inch square star point block. So that's the first thing that we're going to construct. So I'm going to move this over to the side a minute. And that is constructed with a 7.25-inch square, and we're going to make 4 flying geese out of this 7.25-inch square, and we're going to do that with 4 7/8-inch squares corner to corner, and we're going to sew those a scant 1/4 inch each side of the drawn line. You're probably familiar with this process, but we'll go through it real quick. I'm going to pin them on there so they don't move as I try to sew. And just like on my regular disc, and they are front to front on the fabrics, I will have pins everywhere. Using your little 1/4 inch foot, just a scant 1/4 inch on each side of that drawn line. We're going to cut this block into 2 pieces, and we're going to sew on another 2 squares to make our 4 flying geese. Okay, we cut our 1 piece into 2 pieces, so now we're going to make the additional 2 flying geese, so we'll end up with 4 flying geese. Press your seam up towards the blue, add your second square, in the same process we're going to sew a scant 1/4 inch on each side of that square. And again, we're going to cut through these two pieces so that we'll have two, and press the seam up towards the blue. Alright, my 4 flying geese are all trimmed up and ready to go. And trim those up with my wing clipper ruler. Now I'm going to add them to the 6.5 inch center square. And all this information will be in the pattern instructions written down so you have it in front of you. And I'm going to sew 2 of the flying geese onto the 6.5 inch square, which is the center of the block. And I'm going to make sure that I don't cut off the tip of the goose, and that you can see its little point down there. And I'm going to press the seams towards the inside of the 6.5 inch square. And then I've got part of my block completed, and my tips are very evident so you can see those. Then I'm going to take the 3.5 inch squares, and I'm going to sew those on both sides of the 2 remaining flying geese, and then I'll add those to the block. Now I'm going to sew the remaining 2 flying geese onto the star block, and that will complete the 12.5 inch star block. And that's your background for your applique. Carefully match your seams, one seam going up and one seam going down. Again, make sure you don't sew over the tip of the flying goose. And sew the second one on the same way. Matching seams carefully and not sewing over the tip of the goose. We're going to press our block, and when we press our block, we're going to cut or clip the seams up to the stitch line on both sides of those seams that you butted together. And when we press this, we're going to press this seam open. We're going to press the flying geese towards the center, and we're going to press the outside flying geese toward the 3.5 inch square corner so that everything lays flat and that your long arm quilter will love you for that. So your background for your applique is now completed. After pressing the back of, this is what the back of your star block is going to look like. The corner seams are all open. The flying geese their points are pressed towards the center, and your outside seams are pressed towards the 3.5 inch squares. That sets everything down smooth. So now that you're ready to put your leaves on, the applique leaves on, and a little bit about the applique. I made templates out of plastic, and this little template is part of Kay Buckley's Bigger Perfect Circles, so I didn't even have to make that template. I used one of hers for that. It's about a 2.25 inch diameter circle. And when you make your templates with your heat and bond, what you're going to do is you're going to trace your template on your heat and bond, and then you're going to cut out your template, and it's going to be about maybe a 1/4 inch around. You want around where you've cut out, but the second thing that you want to do is you want to cut out the inside of it and leave about a 1/4 inch on the inside of the drawn line, and that reduces bulk and stiffness within your quilting piece. And so every one of your little appliques, this one is the leaf for this block, will have a 1/4 inch of heat and bond around the outside, and I trim off this line as I cut the applique out to put it on the quilt block. So all you've got is the inside there. When I get all of them placed and I'm ready to press them, then I can take the heat and bond off of the applique piece, and you might not be able to see it, but there's the shiny stuff around the outside that when I press it, it's going to stick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place these on my block, because they're the first applique piece that has to be put down. And there's only 4 applique pieces, well actually 3. The big leaves, there's a left and a right. There is the leaves for the Fantasy Sunflower, and then there's the center of the sunflower. When you get your big leaves set out on the applique, and this is also in the pattern too, so you won't have to remember any of this. It's about a half an inch from the edge of the leaf to the intersection of the seam here, and a half an inch, 3/8 to half of an inch from each leaf to the intersection of the seam on the outside. It's about 3/8 of an inch from the center of the goose to where the leaf hits here, and it's about a half an inch down from your rough edge. So those are the hardest ones to place. So once you get those placed, take them to your ironing board, press them down, and use your favorite method of machine applique to applique around all of those leaves. Don't forget to put your applique paper on the back of your 12-inch star block square before you start appliquing. As you notice here, I did the first petal, appliqued the first petal, and realized I had forgotten my paper. So don't forget that. So now we have our petals on there. Is that not gorgeous? And we're going to, or our leaves on there. We're going to put our petals on there. And don't forget, these petals on the heat and bond, I cut the center out so I wouldn't have a lot of bulk in there. So now I'm ready to put them on. So I'm going to place these. The point of the petal is going to be about 3/8 to a half an inch below the point of the flying geese. And I'm going to start with 4. And you just place them on there. The center's going to be open still, and that's okay. I'm not ready for that yet. So that's how the next 4 petals are going to look. So now you're ready to applique the 4 Fantasy Sunflower petals onto your block. I have my 4 Fantasy Sunflower petals appliqued down. So now I'm going to put on the next 4, and they point to the corners of the applique, or of the star block, and the point hits right between 2 of the large leaves. One's heading left and one's heading right, and it's about 1.5 inches down from your seams. So all you have to do is place those on there. That one may be a little high. Get out your ruler and measure it if you want it that exact. And that's what the next 4 will look like. And the last piece to the applique is the sunflower center. And yes, I cut out the heat and bond in the center because I don't want it any heavier than possible, because it gets really stiff and yucky when you have a lot of stuff in there. So there's the center, and just center it over all your fantasy sunflower petals, and you're good to embroidery your last piece onto the quilt block. 2 down, 10 to go. That's it.